I always say that we're all snowflakes. And I get everyone to repeat that I am a snowflake. I am individual. And that's what you need to know, is that you are unique. There is no one like you, and you have not been the same as you or in this moment at any point in your life. You are unique even for your own standards.
Welcome to the Everyday Epigenetics Raw, Real, Relatable podcast. I'm your host, Susan Robbins, epigenetic human performance coach. This is where we discuss all things lifestyle, environment, food, exercise, work, mind, and social interaction as they pertain to epigenetic expression in a way that's relatable to everyone. So if you're ready to start viewing you as an individual, take control of your life and health, and get results, buckle up, here we go. Welcome to Everyday Epigenetics Raw, Real, and Relatable podcast. I'm Susan Robbins. I'm your host. I'm an epigenetic human performance coach, and I'm all about precision health. And this is what we're here to talk about today. And I have, returning from episode 1 last week, we have Dr. McDonald. He is all things precision health. You can check out his full bio in my last episode. Again, it was episode 1. Go ahead and listen to that, because it'll give you a better foundation to understand the detail that we're going to go into today regarding personalized health. Cam is with Precision Health Alliance. They've spent the last 2 decades with big data sets, clinical research, and an AI-based platform that is above and beyond anything you could imagine as far as precision health. And so today, Cam, we're going to talk about how do you actually define and categorize individuality and make it usable.
Yeah, thank you. And it's wonderful to be back for the second time around.
Couldn't get enough the first time.
No, I love it. I could talk about this for hours. So that's the really important question. So definitely in the last episode, we were talking about all of the ways that we're different. So we respond to exercise differently, food differently, time of day differently, social people differently. Even the place that we live in, how we process things in our mind, like all of those things are different. And this can leave people, definitely when I was first learning this information, I was like, well, how the hell are you going to put all this together? And what's so fascinating is that over the last 2 decades, but even before then, for the last 10,000 years, we've been defining people based off different characteristics, their phenotype, what they look like from the outside. Hippocrates, considered the grandfather of medicine, the father of modern medicine, he very clearly knew the difference between an individual that had a bigger, stronger physique and a very light, delicate physique, and knew that different treatments were required for that. Not just because of different size and shape, one's, heavier and lighter, but rather what has created that difference in size and shape. We now know is genetics and hormones. Your body size and shape, your BMI is 70% related to your genetics. So people are naturally, healthfully heavier. So that is, you can have a higher BMI of 30 plus and be completely physiologically healthy. And you can have a BMI of 23, which is normal, and be very, very, very unhealthy as well. And so this is where for eons, we have been looking at how people are different. And now we're able to do that through genetics. But genetics doesn't tell the whole story, because it doesn't tell us how the clusters are working together and what that body has actually done with its environment. We have you at 6 years of age and you at 60 years of age. You need very different foods. You need very different conditions for you to be healthy, even though your genetics is the same. So things happen to your body over time as well. And we had a mission to eliminate chronic disease and pain by 2050. And in order to do that, we have to actually understand, how are you different and what's the intervention that your difference needs to be in your best health. And this is where we studied 10,000 people in the first data set for 5 years in medical practices through Europe. And we were looking at so many different markers of the outside of their body and their clinical findings, and then how they responded to treatments. That data became the base for then what we then have now built with 150,000 individuals. We've got 300 million years of human data analysis. So we've followed an incredible amount of people for an incredible amount of time and have a huge amount of insight into how people are different. And so where that starts with, instead of just thinking everybody's the same, the end of the journey is that everybody's individual. That's very different. That's very, very important. And I always say this whenever I'm doing a keynote, or I always say that we're all snowflakes. And I get everyone to repeat that I am a snowflake. I am individual. And that's what you need to know, is that you are unique. There is no one like you, and you have not been the same as you or in this moment at any point in your life. You are unique, even for your own standards. And so that's the end point of this. And that's what we treat, is the individuality of the person right now in this moment in time. And wearable data is very helpful for that. But the intermediate conversation is, are there people that are similar? And the answer is yes. So if we can start to understand some of the groups of similarities, we can start to essentially educate people on this better. And that's exactly what we do. We have, when we look at embryological development, there's some beautiful things that happen embryologically that separate people into 6 core groups to start with. And this is related to how they've developed in the womb. And we know that people within the same group, we call them health types, they're going to have similar tendencies because they've developed in similar ways. And that similarity goes across culture. That's very important. So, and in between cultures as well, you can have a person who's developed similarly embryologically in Spain and in Iceland and in Samoa, and they'll all have similar tendencies related to the absolute continuums. And so we know that some people are hyper competitive. We know some people are very, very considerate and non-competitive, actually hate competition. We know some people are hyper social. We know some people are incredibly introverted and don't like socializing much at all. We know some people are hyper driven about themselves and their mission. We know some people are hyper driven about their family and everybody else. So we know that these extremes exist within the human population, and everyone sits within those extremes. And all the health types do is help us understand, right, there's a cluster of hyper competitive people here. So they must have some similarities, and they're built similarly as well. So we look at size and shape, morphology of the body, because that's very much determined by genetics and hormones. We also then look at behavior, but we can actually predict some of those behaviors because genetics and hormones also predict behavior. And so a really simple example of this before I jump into the health types would be your ring finger and index finger grow differently depending on the hormones that you're exposed to in the womb. So if you have a look at your ring finger or index finger, we know that the ring finger, if it's longer, it means you've been exposed to more testosterone fetally. So as a fetus, there was more testosterone exposure. That is associated with adult different length of bone. Just take a think about that for a second. It actually changes your adult bone length, what was happening embryologically. Wow. Similarly, there's repeated studies that look at individuals with a longer ring finger. They're more likely to be, like, of all of the elite athletes, more of them have that feature because it's a competitive trait. Competitive, challenging, action orientation comes along with this particular feature. Whereas a longer index finger, there seems to be more maternal and nurturing traits. Now, you can be a very competitive person with a longer index finger. It's only one marker, but we look at many, many, many different markers to understand what's the momentum of this body. Because we know some people are definitely designed for rock climbing. We know that some people are definitely not designed for rock climbing, and it's not attractive to them either. And this is not a good or a bad thing. True. It's just people are different. And so the health types help us understand, right, if we were going to cluster a few people with some similarities based off their embryological development, this is how we can do it. And we can do that by measuring the outside of their body called the phenotype or their morphology. And this is what we've been working with. And so do you want to jump in here before I crack into the health types, Susan, or what would you like to do at this point? Because I can keep going.
Yeah, no, I think, I say keep going with this because this is what pH is about. Yeah, so sweet. Yeah, great. And it'll help people understand. So, yep.
Perfect.
Keep going.
Good as gold. So when it comes to the health types, we have some cool strengths-based names for them. So Hippocrates named his types like the phlegmatic type and the lymphatic type, the bilious type. It's not attractive. No one wants to be called a bilious type person. So we decided, because everything that we are doing is about people will be in their best health if they're operating in their strengths and in their flow. And in order to do that, you need to be surrounded by people that see and acknowledge your strengths and what you're great at And that has such a momentous effect on how you move. And so we want everything that we do to be very strengths oriented. And so the first name is the activator. And the activator, we know that they have some variations of the way that they produce adrenaline. And while we haven't published this, the cadaver work that we've done, we see that these individuals actually have a thicker adrenal gland. And so when they get stimulated, it's really fascinating. And so we also see that they have more sensitivity and production of sex steroids, particularly testosterone. And so you have that as a combination. You've got an individual that is developing, and we can predict this early on in their life as well. So that on two and up, we can start understanding children and how they're developing. So you've got a child that any given environment, they release more adrenaline, and they're more testosterone oriented. Have a think about that for a second. It's like when they react to the world, it's intense because adrenaline is designed to be 100% on, and it's first. I want to be intense and I want to be first. And so what you'll see is that these hormones and these influences influence the entire development of this group of individuals. So we know that sex hormone exposure, and it's estrogen related as well, it will actually shorten their femur. So we end up with a shorter femur on this individual as they develop, which means they're shorter overall in their height, but the testosterone keeps them quite lean. So they're muscular and shorter. Generally, gymnasts are a great example of these individuals. They've got shorter femurs, they've got good muscularity, they're quite lean. And CrossFitters are another good example of, particularly all of the world champ CrossFitters are activators and connectors. So and so what we see in their behavior is everything's related to adrenaline and testosterone. As an exercise, you go, this group, they are competitive, they are fiery, they say exactly what's on their mind, and they don't mind getting into a little bit of biff, like a little bit of challenge. Like they actually find it quite exciting to share exactly what's on their mind. Say, surely we can stir this up. It's a little bit boring. Their whole
big pot stirrers.
Exactly. Their whole brain is thinking, where is my excitement? Where is the adrenaline? Where is the competition? And if I don't have that, I don't like this environment. So we also see that they do very, very well with high intensity interval training. Think about adrenaline, testosterone, first and intense. So it's very intense, and adrenaline is a short-term molecule, or it's designed for short-term use. So that's what their exercise preferences are too. Think about gymnastics again. Think about CrossFit again. Short, intense, very high intense movement. And they get hyper hangry. So that we actually see that not only are they early birds and they do really well with morning exercise, they're fired up first thing in the morning when testosterone is peaking and their glucocorticoids and catecholamines are coming on first thing in the morning. It's like, let's do this. Like that's their time. That's their flow zone. And they are hyper good in the morning. And they need regular meals throughout the day because otherwise they get incredibly hangry. If you don't feed this, then they then start getting aggressive. And this is something that you'll see in children, and it's something that you see in schools as well. You have these kids that just want to move all day long, just want to speak their mind, and they can't because they have to sit still and be quiet, and it's a very unnatural environment for them. And this is what we see in adults as well. So that's the first one, is the activator. And what we know, for them to feel great, they need to move intensely, they need to move regularly, they need to eat regularly, and they also need to be able to fully express themselves intensely and be high-fived for that energy. Be told, geez, I love your energy, as opposed to you're too much, you're too full on, because that's their natural response. And we see this as a very powerful thing. So there's a group of individuals that are like that. Then we have a group of individuals that are opposite to that, and they develop differently. And they have, instead of adrenaline and testosterone being the feature of their physiology, of course, everyone has those hormones, but this is the feature so that we can teach it. This is very important. They've got very sensitive to serotonin. Serotonin is a reward hormone. It's a feel-good hormone. It's, am I in the right place? Have I done the right thing? Have I completed my job? And they have a very sensitive balance of it. And if they don't get enough, it's very distressing for them. And so they don't have the same release of adrenaline or noradrenaline in their body that the activators do. And so activators love change and starting things because that's where their energy is. Let's start stuff with our adrenaline. But if I can see where it's going, it's now boring, I'm not going to finish it. Whereas diplomats, in order to get their serotonin, they have to finish things. They have to feel like, yes, I've completed that job. This is wonderful. And what we see is slightly, it's a longer femur, a stronger physique generally, but diplomats vary incredibly in size. So we can have people like the world's strongest people are right on the cusp of diplomat. That's the bigger version of diplomat. And then you can have individuals that are ultra marathon walkers, those very light, delicate little individuals. So huge variation. And one of the confusions as to why people have really struggled to quantify somatotypes in a useful way before, but this is essentially allowing us to do that. And so what we know about this individual is that they are a night owl, not an early bird. That if they are exposed to stress in the morning, it creates chaos for them in their body physiologically, but in their mind as well. And they get very, very tired in the afternoon, and they're completely kaput at 8 p.m. And they think that they're an early bird because they then wake up early to start the whole cycle again. But as soon as they take it a little bit slower in the morning, it creates hours of productivity later in the day, because we see that their peak productivity can be between 12 and 10 p.m. at night, rather than an activator, which is between 7 or even earlier sometimes, 7 and 12. So understanding that, we then know that when it comes to their physical capacity, they've got bendier joints generally. We find that they've got more flexible joints related to the collagen that they have. This makes them more prone to soft tissue injury if they're doing lots of running and things like that, if they haven't trained well. And so we need to do lots of strength training with them, or pack walking where they're going for a hike with a pack on their back. This is really, really good for their joints. It isn't exposing them to the really high intensity stuff that doesn't make them feel as good, that they're not as accustomed to. And what's fascinating is they need time and space. They are looking to complete a job. So they like to consider things, and they love occupying their brain with lots of intellectual things, so that they can consider more things, so that when they take action, they'll get the right answer and they'll complete the job and they'll get their serotonin. Everything is about, where am I going to complete this? Whereas the activator is, what can I start next now? So this is the difference in decision making. You've got some person that's thinking, oh, I need to complete this one job at a time. And then some friend comes along and says, oh, hey, I've got these 3 other jobs that I need you to do. And they said, none of my energy systems were set up for these extra jobs. I had all of my reward coming from this one job. Now I can't do that. Now I'm in chaos. And in stress, they procrastinate. And so they're incredibly considerate, incredibly fair, incredibly thorough. And but if they are given lots of external inputs that compress their time, they now don't have the time to consider. They don't have the time to get their outcome and get their serotonin. And this creates chaos and a highly strung phenotype for this individual. Yeah. But naturally they're cruisy and calm, and they take things at their own pace. But you'll see a stressed diplomat very highly strung. And so their food, it's not 5 meals a day. It's actually 3 meals per day. And hydration is hyper important for them. And green leafy vegetables are hyper important for them. And lunch being their biggest meal is very important. And their exercise, if they're going to do it really hard, should be done in the afternoon, not in the morning. In fact, they can go backwards and predispose themselves to injury if they do too much exercise in the morning. And so this is where we've got one hyper-competitive, energized, adrenalized group of individuals. And then we've got individuals over here that are calm, considerate, just want to take their time to complete the job. It's 2 completely opposing individuals.
Completely different.
And amazingly, you can have friends and couples that fit that mold all of the time. And they either learn to accept each other, or they really just never really understand the other person. And the connection wanes over time.
True. So it absolutely.
Yeah.
And what I see a lot of too is both of those types living as the other.
Oh, that's right. And particularly in Australia, we have an early bird culture out here, and we've got a lot of diplomats just due to our ancestral line. There's in Anglo Caucasian genetics, where even just and phenotype, what we've seen when we went out of just Europe and Central Europe, we then went into and Western Europe. We then went out broadly to America and Australia, where there's a lot more sort of Caucasian descent. And what we see is a lot more diplomats, and we have early bird cultures, and they're wondering why they're not getting results, and why they're battling with their health, their digestive system, which is where their diseases or their conditions can play out. And that stress just means I'm very tired at night for my kids, but I've got this want to care for them, and I can't mount it, so I just get frustrated. And when they go to I had an interesting one. A lady that thought she was an activator, was definitely a diplomat, and had the best experience of her life when she went to Fiji. She said, it took me about 3 days to unwind. And then everything was like on my schedule. And I said, yes, because that's exactly your biology. I was frustrated in Fiji because nothing was happening early and everything was on Fiji time. And we'll talk about Crusaders in a second. And so this is where, we just need to understand there are very different types of people, even just with the activators and diplomats. And they're not all the same. Very important. Different activators are different. Different diplomats are different. But as a group, just to help us understand the continuums, there's a considered, calm, time and space individual. There's a competitive, fast, intense cluster of individuals. And if we understand that, it's an incredible starting point as opposed to everybody's the same. So we then have the next individuals, which the guardian. And the guardian is the individuals with the biggest and strongest bodies. They hold the most weight. They are incredibly strong. All of the world's strongest individuals are guardians. They've got the most amount of muscle, but they also have the greatest capacity of storing the most amount of fat. And this is because their stress response is to conserve energy. And so every system within their body, if they go into some sort of stress, will aim at releasing cortisol to get through it. And that will create insulin resistance and obviously all of the other metabolic factors that come along with it as well.
Right.
Hypersensitive to sugars. And they're also, there's a number of other things that we need to talk about, but the most important thing is that they are incredibly nurturing and protective or protective. And this comes from the relationship they have with prolactin. They've got a bigger body from all of the growth factors. And what we see is individuals with bigger, stronger bodies are generally more nurturing and or protective of their family. And this is because of prolactin. Prolactin is the most selfless hormone. It is, I'm going to give you milk out of my breast, even though you've cried, pooed, vomited all night and haven't given me a break. And then you cry again and I produce more milk. It's the most selfless thing on the planet. So it's, I'm out of energy, but I'm giving it all to you. So an individual with a greater sensitivity to this will be more nurturing, and it comes along with this structure as well. So you'll see these incredibly generous, selfless individuals that struggle with their weight based on social norms. And what we know is that the way that they need to be supported is through, they need to have a much lighter dinner. They need to have 3 meals per day. They need to be mostly plant-based. They need to be doing long walks, or they need to be lifting some heavy weights, but generally they need to start with lots of aerobic activity, but it doesn't need to be hard. It actually just needs to be easy, but highly circulatory, I should say. And so this individual, they've got a bigger, stronger body. They're designed for looking after people. They need less food, essentially, and they need lots more activity. And their whole orientation is my family okay? And they'll constantly put their family first. And if you don't engage with family around goals for this individual, then they won't feel like they can really do stuff for themselves. And they should spend the first few hours of the morning making sure that everybody in their life has everything that they need, so that their family is good. And then they'll be able to spend their own energy in the afternoon. What we see is this response of worry or anxiety, essentially, from the guardian, thinking, is everybody in my family okay? That then leads to cravings. Say that again.
Yeah, guilt. If they try to put themselves up at the front, it creates so much guilt with them that creates so much stress, and then they're storing more and taking out everybody else's stress. Okay, personal development person. And I wanted to ask one thing back with when you brought up plant-based, because again, these are people that are told protein, or they may come up on a lab work as low protein. So this doesn't mean that they shouldn't be eating any animal proteins at all, right? But it's because it's putting a lot of stress on the liver, which is also part of what's happening with them metabolically. Am I correct there?
Yeah, so what we find is for guardians, we find that their conditions will normally stem from liver, pancreas, thyroid, and large bowel conditions. And that's related to their embryological development again. And so when we're treating them, when we're trying to really support their metabolism, what we look to do for a period of time is to lift off a lot of the demands of the liver so that it can actually process the fat that is accumulating in that liver. And that comes with very specific, high vegetable-based, lower protein, lower carbohydrate diet. And it's not for all the time. And this is where it's not for everyone. So some guardians can eat plenty of meat. And this is the thing. If they're exercising really well, doing plenty of activity, and their body composition's in a good spot, then meat will actually appear, and they process it quite well. It's just that generally in America, Australia, the UK, and I'd actually say in New Zealand, so when you've got guardian populations, wherever they are, there's an ease to over accumulate with the stress of the environment, but also the foods that we're provided as well. So, yes. So when we're thinking about motivating this person, they've got a family orientation, which means I'm going to do things for my family. I'm going to do that first. And they really need support. But everyone in the personal development space says, you have to do this yourself. You have to be self-motivated. You have to pick yourself up. When in fact, this person thrives in a group. They will turn up for a cup of coffee after a workout as long as it's the same people or a group that they get to spend time with. They're not there for a workout. They're there for the cuppa. They come along to an event at the gym or whatever it might be because it's connection, not because they like doing the workout. They love the feeling of being part of this. That's their family orientation. That's what they're motivated by. And so to think this person needs to go it alone is going against all of their biological mandate. They want to be there for you as much as you need to be there for them. And so if you're a person that's resonating with this, lean into your support structures and know that you aren't just you are your community. And if your self-discipline comes from your community because you are your community. And that's a really important way of thinking about it, because you can get stuck in all of these guys that are talking about, oh, yep, you've got to think this way and that way and for yourself, which is incredibly powerful for the Crusader. So the Crusader is the opposite to the Guardian. So what happens is as prolactin goes down, dopamine goes up and vice versa. And this is from what we've seen in the data that we've collected, we've seen that Crusaders are more sensitive to dopamine in their reward centers in their brain, the ventral tegmental area. And this is where you're essentially setting up and driving towards goals. And so this individual isn't so focused on everybody else. They're focused on their goal, what's going to reward their brain. And they've got a very clear vision and mission. They know where they want to go. And they've got a more of a triathlete type physique. They do in fact, most of the world champ triathletes are Crusaders, and most of the Tour de France guys are Crusaders as well. And this is because they've got that powerful dopamine driven brain. Everyone's got dopamine, but not everybody needs to live in it to feel like they're normal. Some people like to just do things just for fun with no purpose. Dopamine has a purpose. So this is where you've got a hyper-focused individual. They'll work really, really hard. They'll then come and go for a 5-hour ride on the weekend to make sure that they're tracking their data and their watts and their metrics because they love that data analysis as well. They've got that triathlete physique, and everything is about, what is my goal? What is my outcome? Where am I headed? And I've got a great story about this. It was a lawyer that I was working with, very, very successful criminal lawyer, great guy. And he finished the biggest case of his life. It had been a journey for 2 years. And what he would do with flights, he would book 5 business class seats. He would book them all, pay for them all, because if you don't turn up for a business class seat, they just refund you the cash. So that's the flexibility that it comes along with it. And so what he would do, he'd book all these seats. He finished this massive case. Everybody's celebrating. This is like some guy who was in jail for 2 years, got acquitted. The jury apologizing to the guy as he's leaving the building. Like, it was an incredible. He sat down, had a quarter of a beer and said, yeah, I've got to go. And then went back to work. And so this is what a Crusader does, is they love being in the dopamine of the doing. They don't like the finishing. They get the finish is part of it. But once I finish, what's my next job? And they're obsessed with progress. And so this is a person that will climb the ladder of a corporate organization. This is the person that will have that big mission and just block out what everybody else is saying because they're on their path, they're on their journey. They need lots of carbohydrates. They need a good amount of protein, but we know that their digestive system isn't as strong. They're very neurally strong, but digestively they're not as strong. So things need to be a bit more digested for them. We know that they do better with endurance exercise. We know that they don't do as well with really heavy weights, and they can do it for a period, but not long. and they actually do better with endurance and light to moderate weights with higher rep ranges. We know that from a work point of view, they're really, really good in the morning where dopamine levels are naturally higher. And then they still get dopamine in the afternoon because that's their makeup, but it needs to be finer, smaller tasks. There's little variations, even to the point where they need to be resting their mind between 5 to 8, where your dopamine production is naturally lower. But that's really important for them. And so rather than trying to fight through it and push their brain through it and have another coffee to keep charging, if you know that your natural system is lower at that point and you rest, you get more recovery. And this is where they can then have ongoing success with everything that they're doing as well. So we've got the Guardian, which is all about the nurture and the protection and the less food and the more activity. We've got another individual that's just on a marathon race their whole life. And as soon as one marathon's finished, they're going to the next marathon because they don't get any enjoyment out of doing nothing. They just prefer to be getting things done. Sorry, you go.
And they like that coffee because they think they need it, but in actuality, it's not doing them any favors, right?
Well, that's in some cases. So, so generally, Crusaders have enough noradrenaline and dopamine to give them flow. And the difference that they'll experience is their energy flows versus they have to push to get work done. Mm-hmm. It's that push is it's a stress response. It's a compensation. And it can be not enough food. It could be too much coffee. It can over-electrify them when it comes to the activity in their brain. And but then some Crusaders, and they've got different structures. Some Crusaders are bigger and stronger, and they can tolerate actually a little bit of caffeine. And it even depends on the location. I know that my output is quite low in Australia, but if I go back to Europe, I can have more coffee. So, and this is where it even changes throughout the year as well, which is kind of interesting. So, and this is all just the underpinnings of the technology and how it does what it does. So, we then have finally the last two are the connector and the sensor. So the connector is oxytocin dominant. And what I mean by that, of course they have dopamine, of course they have adrenaline, of course they have serotonin. But if you were to characterize their behavior, it is, how can I connect with people? How can I give love? How can I receive love? This is my currency. I don't need to get all of the outcomes in the world. I've got my friends and I'm having great fun with them and I feel fantastic. They've got this incredibly, think of the Lego man in the Lego movie, short, square, robust body. You'll see a bunch of them do well in CrossFit. And everything, their whole lens is, do I fit in this social circle? Am I connected to people? And they'll naturally find that, in fact, what's really fascinating, when we've looked at EEGs of their activity, their brain scans, we see that they use more of their occipital lobe when they're doing any activity. That is, they are using more of their visual cortex than other individuals relatively. And one of the gifts that they have is that they can actually look at somebody's face and predict their emotions. And this actually comes along with a particular oxytocin variant as well. You can predict a person's emotional state based off their facial expression. And this is how a connector does their work. They look at your face, they predict what's going on, and then they mirror you. They become a chameleon and they match your state. And so what's really fascinating about this, and the really interesting element of it, is because they want to feel connection. Oxytocin requires some sort of vulnerability. And because they've got big feelings as well, they're very heart-centered individuals. They're not hyperlogical. They really feel things a lot, just due to the way that their amygdala works and how it signals throughout their body. And they want to be able to talk out all of the things that are going on for them. And sometimes they need to say things that people aren't ready to receive. And that then makes them feel like they've had a bad social engagement. And then that can make them shut down. But they actually need to talk it out to give themselves therapy. Just talking is therapy for these individuals. So because they really allow them to process all of the feelings that they've had and clear their mind. And so they need people around them that are just completely accepting of who they are. Whereas a Crusader doesn't need that. The Crusader goes, yeah, I know that they don't like me, but we're getting this job done. We're getting the outcomes. I don't care. The connector work is so sensitive to that. It's like, we can't continue work until we're feeling better here, please. So the when we then look at their body, they need 4 meals per day. And obviously you can dive into the detail of this with your own profile. And the kind of exercise they can do is so varied and wide. They're strong because of the way that they're built. They've got some endurance. They've got agility. They've got stronger joints than the Activator, but they're not as big as the Guardian. So they've got that strength and agility. They won't be as good as the Crusaders in long endurance stuff, but they've got a better endurance capacity than the Activators that get too inflamed when they do too much endurance. So there's a difference in the way that they operate too, but it's so social and so visual. And this is, my son, it really matters who he spends time with, because he will come back. And even this morning, we're playing soccer this morning, he speaks exactly like his best friend who he spent the afternoon with yesterday, exactly the same. Wow. And until I have him for a period of time where it's just us, and then he'll come back to Alistair as per normal, for example. But he'll hang out with some people and he'll chameleon to them. And this is so, and so when you're an adult and you're wanting to be motivated, once again, spend time with people that accept you and represent you, the behaviors that you want in yourself, and you'll naturally match them. Whereas different people go into that social situation and go, nah, I don't like that. I'm going to do my own thing. Connectors are much more likely to do the thing that's happening in the group because it allows them to assimilate. So once again, I guess we talk about health, but so much of this person's health and sense of self and the calmness within their system is related to their social interaction. And that will then change their food and their exercise and how they interact with those. And we had one individual running ultra marathons. And because it was such a wonderful community, the coach asked, like, what do you get out of this running? Do you find it hard? And they go, oh, no, it's pretty easy. As long as we've got people around, like the food's pretty straightforward. The running's pretty easy, but we just got a great tribe. Like that's the comment. Whereas if you talk to a Crusader about that same thing, it's like, it is tough, but that's why I've turned up and I'm looking to improve my times and I've just got to dial in my carb amounts here and here. It's like nothing to do with the people, and it's all to do with the metrics and the outcomes. And we're all different, and this is important. So we then finally have the pure introvert. So connectors, they get more excited the more people that are around, and they get more energy from people. And then we have the introvert, the sensor. We find that they have the most delicate structure. They have think of a high jumper, think of an ultra marathon walker, those very delicate individuals with not as much muscle tissue, not as much fat tissue. We know that they've got a very, very powerful nervous system. Their brain is thinking constantly, and they're often told to think, hey, you need to stop thinking as much. And that's like telling a bear to stop being so beary. It's just, this is what I do. I'm a thinker, and I'm internalizing my thoughts because that's where they make sense, and that's where I have my world. And they love that world. A connector needs to talk their whole world out. A sensor will want to keep it to themselves, and they're very quiet. And what we know about a body like that is that they're hypersensitive to the environment. Their nervous system, their amygdala, sends up all of these really powerful messages to their cortex. It's called the ascending reticular activating system.
All right, stopped.
They have more activity in their cortex for a given stress, and that means they think more for a given stress. Okay, I'm cold, I'm thinking more. I'm hungry, I'm thinking more. Person's making noise over here, I'm thinking more. An activator, they process the same stress, but physically. It's like, I'm cold, I'll move. This person's talking too loud, I'll tell them. I'll action it. I'll create some fire here. The sensors they feel everything in their brain. They process everything in their brain. Yeah. But what's really interesting about them is that they've got a great a tendency to demineralize and to lose and to be catabolic. Their muscle breaks down easily. Weight loss is actually a problem for them. They lose weight too easily. Their bones become demineralized easily if they're in chronic stress. And so we've got to do everything to build this person up. The Guardian needs 3 meals a day and more or less plant matter. This sensor actually needs good doses of protein, good doses of carbohydrates, good doses of minerals that then support bone reformation and muscle tissue maintenance. But at the same time, they don't have the limbs or the muscular tissue to do really heavy weights. We've actually got to be really careful with heavy weights for them. So it's light to moderate weights, high repetition, and we see that gets a much better result. So we have this individual that's hypercognitive, will think and feel everything, will be incredibly empathic, and that is I will feel what you're feeling from across the room. They are so sensitive to all of the things that come into their world. And this is just from the work that we've done, the people that we know are sensors that reflect back their experience of life. They need lots of carbohydrates. They need lots of things that mineralize and support collagen development, whether it be their bones, whether it be their muscle tissue, protein. But we need to have it in very small doses because their digestive system is quite weak. They produce less acid. So they actually need minced foods. When they're being a big steak and undigested meats can just lead to headaches for them, and they don't then metabolize the nutrients that they've taken in. So we've got this sensitive individual that needs a calm, warm, quiet space, and that calms their nervous system, and that allows them to focus and use their incredibly powerful brain to do their work and to think and to create. And they're incredibly creative when they feel safe in that calm, warm environment. So just to summarize all of that, we have 6 types, and they have oppositions across the circle, but it's just speaking to the continuums that we see individuals. And as I've gone through this, you go, yeah, I know someone like that. That's about 70% of them. And that's totally normal because we have an activator that actually has bendy joints, and they have a calmer brain. And they don't act fully like an activator, but they've still got traits of it. And their physiology, the predominant morphology would indicate that they've got a lot of the factors that make up an activator, but that individual nuance will play out in the profile that is completed with Shay, and that's what we teach at the Precision Health Alliance. And then things like an activator with pale skin and pale eyes and pale hair. Obviously, their genes are from Scotland, but they're now out in Australia, and you can think of me as an example here. I've got all of those features, and my melanoma risk is much, much higher in Australia than it would be back in Scotland where my genes developed. And so Shay, the technology takes that into account to say, okay, well, our risk of disease for this activator in this environment at this time of year and with this waist circumference, their inflammation is going to be a little bit higher, which lowers their immune system, makes them more predisposed potentially to cancer cells, whatever it might be. And obviously that's not the only reason we get cancer, but there's all of those factors are actually being calculated now by the AI. The 6 health types help us just teach the general principles, but ultimately the real work is done when we're then really starting to nuance where this person sits and what their body needs. And so hopefully this is, I guess, you tell me, Susan, is there anything else I'd add to that to give that picture?
No, I think everything was spot on, Cam. I love your examples every time. And every time you talk about the activator, I'm going, my God, that is so me. Although I'm right on the cusp of connectors. So I go, oh my God, that was even more me. I think I've morphed more into my activator self. But, and then you, again, like you said, you think about friends and everything. And I'm going, this is them. And a funny point there, she's now a PH coach, but one of my friends here, we would be texting and people text me all day. Well, I'm busy because I have my list of things to clip off that I'm doing because I have to be doing things. And if I don't focus, I have issues. And so I get messages come in and I think I'm being good given a 1-word answer because I'm communicating. Right. But then I would get, are you okay? Are you mad? I'm like, I'm not mad. I'm just busy. And then my friend became a PH coach. She's a sensor, started as Decoded, but she's a sensor. And she said, I finally got it, that you were never mad. It wasn't anything I should have taken personally. It's just who you are, that like in the morning or the early part of the day, I'm so hyper-focused. You'll see me get wordy at night, like around 6 when my day is done. Then I'll answer with more words. But so it's just really fun to relate to all this. And that's why this podcast it's all about being relatable, because you can go to other podcasts and get the deep science of everything, the whys, all the research. But what I wanted to bring here and what I love that you just brought is people to be able to see in everyday life, the whys and how all of these things are just so impactful. So I'm just so grateful for you to have brought this out. And again, once you start getting into this, you never look back. You can't unhear it, see it. 2 of us were the same coach. We were at a concert last year And the one guitar player walked across the stage and he had his hand up and we looked at each other at the same time. Exact same thing. We said, look at the sensor.
Yeah.
So it's just these incredibly long, thin fingers. And we said, like, we're at a concert and that's the first thing we think is look at the sensor walking across the stage.
Yeah.
It just doesn't leave you anymore. You just view everybody and everything around you in a different way. And, and I'm just so proud to be a part of this group that's just leading the way with this AI-based information, and just such a great group of people that work with it. And
well, the thing that I'd love to add to that is because for people that are not into labels, it's like, oh, I don't like being categorized or whatever. That's totally cool. So just know that you are an individual, but there are only so many ways that the human body develops, and that's predictable. That's immeasurable also. And so the very important thing if you understand this is that it's about creating more understanding of the person. Because right now, most people walk around and think, oh, they think like me. Why are they doing something I wouldn't do? And that's the big mistake that we make. And it immediately, for me particularly, it increased my empathy out of sight. Like now I understood,
100%.
This person needs to express themselves that way. Cool. I actually encourage that now. I was like, mate, make sure you get it off your chest. Like it's really important that you get it out. Whereas for another person, it's like, yeah, I just want my own time. I was like, cool, man. No worries. Like take your own time. Like I'm here to chat when you want to chat, or if you want to write me a note, whatever it is. It's when you see that sensor up on stage, you go, oh man, you'd be thinking, how do they handle all of this really, really loud music all of the time? You know,
in the late hours.
Totally. It's you become more understanding of people and allows you to then connect with them better. And like, what are we trying to do on the planet? Like what actually makes us healthy? That is connection. And you can't connect when you're constantly coming from your own frame of reference. You have to be able to understand another person's frame of reference. And if you can understand that at a deeper biological level, the insight that you will have, and even we see couples that have been together 40 years, they come through the course and they go, oh, we've been like making each other get up at the same time each morning for the last 30 years because we thought that was it. And I just thought there was something wrong with me. And now the early bird wakes up, goes out and does their exercise, comes back, gets the night owl a cup of tea while they're still waking up in the morning. Both people have had their ultimate morning. They are so much happier now because they realize it's not a choice. It's biology. And if anyone's getting worried about the nature nurture component of it as well, it's like that our fate is, we have a fate, or that everything is destined, whatever it might be. That's not the case either. It's just like saying if you've got a Ferrari, there's ways that you can use that Ferrari to get the job done as opposed to a four-wheel drive. Now, if you're driving that Ferrari on a really great highway going as fast as possible, the Ferrari is in flow. It is loving it. It will be awesome. You take it off-road, it's not going to enjoy it so much. It's going to, the undercarriage will be all barked up and you'll see a whole lot of damage to that car. And the same thing goes for our physiology. Some individuals come out and they are bigger and stronger and more physical. And if they throw heavy things like a shot put, they succeed at it really well. If you take an individual that's got a tiny, delicate little frame, naturally, which is, and you make them do shot put, they fail. And it's the whole quote from Albert Einstein is that if you expect a fish to climb a tree or judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will think its whole life that it's stupid. That's exactly what we're talking about here. We want you to be more intelligent about how is your body developed. How can you use the strengths that you have with the design of the body that you have to do things in a way that align more with you? Spend time with people that align with you, because in that's where you're going to flow. Anybody can be good at anything, but there are some people that are naturally built to be better at that thing as well. And that's okay because you've got something that you're naturally built to be better at too. But if you want to overcome that, you can. It's just going to require a different type and a different amount of work for somebody is. So free will is not gone. But if you understand your capacity, this is where you can actually double down on your strengths. And probably the one thing I'd say is I love David Goggins, and he often talks about
I'm going to see him in April.
Oh, that's amazing.
He's coming here. I can't wait.
He always talks about, you just triple down on your weaknesses. So it's like, but what's interesting is that Dave Goggins is a crusader based off the structure
so
that you can see. And David Goggins' strength as a crusader is the dopamine drive that he has, which is to overcome pain. Crusaders are designed to overcome pain. In fact, if there's no stretch or pain, they don't think it's worth doing. So whenever he's tackling something mentally or physically, he's doing it with his mind. And that's the way that he talks as well. Everything's in the mind. And that's exactly his strength. He's just overcoming physical, or he's overcoming a big challenge that otherwise he may not have been good at. But he does it through his absolute strength, which is his mental toughness and the dopamine drive that he has. Whereas for somebody else, you think about Eddie Hall, the world's strongest man. So much of it, like, he's very competitive, yes, but so much of it is about creating stability for his family. If you watch his documentary, this big guardian body doing this thing to create stability for the family. Like, it's the motivation is actually the family, but then he has a naturally that's his nuance as well, is that he's naturally competitive as well and driven. But this is where guardians can have a difference. So I just love everyone to just check that you that actually working in your strengths is key. You know, Eddie working for his family, Goggins working with his mind. These are people in their strength. That's why they're succeeding. So the more that you can understand yourself, the more you understand your strengths, the more success you're going to have, the more enjoyment you'll have in life as well.
Oh, yeah. And it's that authenticity again, being authentically you. There was a quote I posted. I have no idea who said the quote, but it was one of the ones on my Facebook page that got the most, like, wow. And it was, someone once told, I'm probably going to say it incorrectly, but you get the gist of it. But it was, someone once told me the definition of hell: when the person you've been meets the person you should have been, or you could have been. Right.
Yeah. Oh my
and
gosh.
that is such a profound comment. When that one really hit me, because it's how much of our lives did we live trying to be who we're not to please everybody else, and then go meet the person that this is who you actually were. Yeah. Right. And that just spoke so much to me. And what I love, one of the other things that I wanted to bring up before we go is when you were talking about how your risk for cancer, skin cancer, changed when you being in Australia because of the location. And we see, when I pull up foods, I get all excited because I start eating a food in the winter. In the summer, it drops to the bottom of the list. I'm going, where did you go? Now I have to switch up. But how the beauty of the Shea platform is that it's always meeting you where you are. Right? Yeah. People get diets or programs that are, this is what it's going to be for you all the time. Yeah. Our hormones change with the seasons. Foods change with the seasons. How we work with everything changes. And even your goals, whether it's gaining muscle, losing fat, maintaining your shape and size. This platform is always meeting you exactly where you are, how things are expressing, and where it's going to take you to be ideal there. And I just love that part of it. Even though my Palisade peaches, my addiction tends to drop in the summer, and I had to back off on it instead of like 2 a day. Yeah. I remember texting Cab when I saw it. It went down. It's like a couple times a month. And I literally have I call my crack dealer on the corner in this short Palisade peach season. And I go down, I hand him my money, and he gives me my paper bag, and I just feel dirty. Then I go home and I eat my peaches in the corner. And was it 2 years ago? It came up as like once or twice. Like twice a month or something. And I messaged Cam in a panic, and I go, Cam, my peaches have dropped to like sometimes on my list. What the hell am I going to do? And you're like, eat the damn peaches, Susan, then check your blood sugar after the simmer and see how it does. And then last year they were good, but it's just funny because it's at that time I was having issues with insulin resistance. The last year I wasn't. So yeah. Again, it's always meeting you where you are and saying, this is where this body needs support. It's not saying, this is where this body is and this is what we're going to recommend. It's always, as you said, saying that this is where this body is needing support to get you to where you want to be. So it's just a beautiful thing. And I thank you so much for all your time and coming on here. And I think people are just going to jam on this because it's so relatable. And people are tired of the guesswork. they're spending so much money and so much time on things that aren't designed for them. And this is where the difference is. And if you're interested in working with me or looking and seeing if we're a fit, I am an endorsed PH 360 coach. And I'm going to go ahead and give myself a little touting because I was the 2023 PH 360 Coach of the Year. So I'm going to throw that in there. And again,
by unanimous decision, I would say. There was the team that were the judges had absolutely no question in their mind. It was awesome. So, well, congratulations. It's amazing having you part of the community. And obviously, I couldn't recommend Susan more highly. And I would say that if you're wanting to expand, whether it be understanding your relationships, understanding your kids, this for your workplace, this for your gym, or just understanding more about personalization in general, there'll be plenty of links and resources that you can have. We're essentially, not only does the app provide what an individual needs at each point, but we have different content for different people in different stages of their life so that you can really make the most of all of this information. And the kid stuff is something I'm particularly passionate about, and the learning, we're doing some great research on that at the moment, which I'm really excited about. So it's a really exciting time for precision health. It's the only way that this industry is going. And the really powerful bit about what we're doing is it's not just going to be about, oh, you've got this variant that's activated in this way and this chemical that needs this specific nutrient. That's very important. But it's also about, hey, actually, who am I, and how can I be more of me while I'm walking on Earth? Because that is where life is its best. So,
amen.
Yeah.
And I love that you said that about the DNA, because as most of you guys know out there, I also am a certified coach with DNA. And I will tell you, I used to coach DNA only when I first started, because I started with DNA, and then I found the pH, and I would just say, okay, well, I'll coach you either way. Now I'll do a DNA one and done, but none of my coaching programs that you look at are done without PH 360 or my Precision Health Shay. Because if you want optimal, you've got your DNA as your blueprint, okay, that says these are your probabilities and propensities, not your absolutes. And then you have your epigenetics comes in, your lifestyle and environment, creating your phenotype where you are. There's Shay. And that's your user manual. So we can provide the blueprint and the user manual, but I will not coach DNA without Shay. Because your DNA will tell you, okay, maybe you do better with a higher level of carbs, or maybe you do better. But when you see an actual food list that's specific to you on nutrient density and the timing, you don't get any of that through DNA. Sorry. And again, I'm a proponent of DNA, but it has its place. It's phenomenal. But when you really want to get dialed in, this is how you dial into every aspect of you, from the mind, the body, the soul, from how you're created. And then the DNA, when I go through DNA report, I'm like, follow your pH recommendations because they're spot on again. It's really, the DNA really validates a lot of what the pH says, because I'll hear people say, how do you know this is right? I mean, you've done measurements and a questionnaire with me, and it's mind blowing when the DNA results come back and I already have them going through the pH, and they're like, wow, now I see why you don't do the two apart. Because the pH just it's so precise. It is precision health, 100%. And that's why we're here. And that's why I'm trying to get the word out, because people don't know about this. It's, you guys are based in Australia, New Zealand, huge. There's over 1,000 coaches. And there's a small group of us on a little island in the US, and a lot of them I've brought in that have worked with me or come across me in different coaching circles, whatever. But we need to get the word out, because people need to understand themselves. And this is where the goals come in, and you really see change. So, So thank you so much, Cam, from the bottom of my heart, for being here. And you're coming back, right?
Anytime. I love chatting to you.
I got more to get out of you.
Chatting about this stuff. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for being such an integral part of my journey and my career and continued success. So
it's been my pleasure.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And I will see you on the next episode of Everyday Epigenetics, Raw, Real, Relatable. Thank you for tuning into my podcast. If you enjoyed this week's episode, I'd love for you to share it with someone who'd find the information useful. Please leave a review anywhere you listen to podcasts, and it'll help the information get out to others. If you're interested in seeing if we're a great fit to work together, the link is in the show notes below where you can sign up for a free consultation with me. So go make it a great day and let your authentic self shine.